All right, good start to the week. I think guys understand the magnitude of this game, understand we made a lot of mistakes last week, a lot of things that we need to improve on. Like I mentioned, going into, you know, an extremely hard place to play against an ultra talented football team. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. It was good. We looked a little in better health out there today. It's good to see Trey out there and Priestcorn out there. So I'm sure Jackson feels good about that.
Lane, they've shown three different quarterbacks first 2 weeks. Just in terms of preparing, how do you kind of prepare your defense for who they might see this weekend?
Yeah, that's a unique challenge, one that I don't think you ever face normally because usually it's two, not three. And then whether they go back, and so that's challenging because obviously one of the three are very different than the other two. So, but got to be ready for whoever plays, and we got to work on ourselves first, which is we got to play a lot better on defense because we did not play very good Saturday.
A lot's been made of the quarterback situation, but they also have a new offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees. Outside of quarterback, does the offense itself look different than it has in recent years?
A little bit. I think that that's a little hard to say just because they're trying to figure out the quarterback, and anytime you're trying to do that and with different quarterbacks, that's a work in progress. So I'm sure they'll work it out. And every previous games don't mean anything year to year, week to week. You see that in college football all the time. So like I say, like in the NFL, teams play each other twice, and the same team doesn't win every time twice. So every week's different, and just because these guys struggled a little bit, down in non-conference type of game they're not used to playing, and some weather issues means nothing about playing SEC, the way that they play in the SEC at home.
Lane, obviously, it's been well documented ever since you arrived here, just how appreciative you've been for working underneath Nick Saban and, helping you kind of get to where you are today. Just going into your fourth year, I mean, is that appreciation just grown and grown as time has gotten on? Is it something that you still think about to this day?
Yeah, it is. I think that sometimes with time those things happen, that you continue to be appreciative for the opportunity that he gave. But not just that. People give people opportunities all the time, but the things that I learned from him defensively, things I learned from him organizationally, discipline. So I'm extremely grateful to him, and he really helped me at a really challenging time in my life. Like they kind of say sometimes, I guess, you don't really figure out yourself sometimes until you're kind of torn down and have to rebuild yourself. And I'm grateful for him being part of that process.
All the former, I guess, Saban assistants, kind of have their own way of approaching this game. What's yours? How do you approach this one when it comes up?
I don't think about it that way. I mean, these things always, it seems like whoever leaves him ends up taking some coaches at some point. So there's always kind of intertwined things, and people still communicate within the office and both places. So I don't really overthink that because, I don't make the plays. We got a lot of coaches and players that do that. So I don't really put anything extra into that. We just got to prepare for an opponent that's got great players. And I mean, I was thinking this morning, probably Perkins, probably our only player on our roster they wanted. So, if you look at it that way, they basically had 85 draft picks, and then we took what they didn't want. So you gotta go there and play against that. You got to be really well prepared. You got to get some breaks. You got to really scheme things up just to have a chance.
So, Lane, Saturday night, I thought we defensed the speed sweeps, the horizontal runs pretty well with our speed, but right up between tackles, how did you surmise that? Just missed opportunities or people in the wrong places?
Yeah, I thought Georgia Tech did a good job. I could be wrong, but I think Georgia Tech's going to be good offensively throughout the year, which they were number one AC coming in through 2 weeks. But they're much improved. Their coaching staff's really schematically done a good job. Took the A&M quarterback, and he seems like a brand new player the way they have him playing. So I think they're going to move the ball on a lot of people, but we got to play better.
I know you don't get into specifics with injuries, but Zamari Walton went down. When can Ole Miss fans expect him to return?
Yeah, I would anticipate him being fine.
Well, I think the last time that Alabama lost this early into the season was when you were there, and then when Ole Miss went to Tuscaloosa and beat them. But just having been on that team and all that, for a program of that stature, losing that early into the season, could you sense that there was a little bit more pressure on them at that point in time, just kind of feeling like their backs against the wall when they really weren't? Or was that kind of irrelevant?
Well, I think, you guys hear me talk about what's bad is good and what's good is bad. What you think is one thing can be the other. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you lose early. I mean, I was thinking of going there. I think, in my 3 years there, we only lost one time at home the whole time, and that was Ole Miss. And sometimes that can kind of humble, the team, can reset things. And you see that often. People have a loss early. People start discounting them, and all of a sudden, they start playing better and they fix their issues, versus sometimes you don't play well, but you win games and, kind of, push through some things that really are issues that are going to show up later if you don't fix.
Lane, Coach Saban's had to go through different coordinators quite a bit often. You've had to do that as well. How difficult is that?
It's really challenging. We've had a lot of turnover here of guys, getting different jobs and having to reset structure-wise, offense and defense and position. So he's done it better than anybody over time, and really, again, speaks to why he's the best coach in the history of college football and maybe all of sports. To be in a time of scholarship limitations, which the old coaches didn't deal with. I mean, I just told you he's got 85 players we couldn't get. What if he had 150, so like they used to. So, and then the staff's now moved so much, so he's been able to work through that, and like no one ever has. And so that's why he's the best. It's really amazing what he does.
Lane, what did you see on film that led you to make the comment last night about Coach Robinson coaching their defense?
That was, again, I was asked the question what it was like going against Steele's defense, so I wasn't really trying to start this big thing. We saw things on TV copy just where it was different, of first off of what the play looked like, the calls and stuff, and then so we looked into that further, and then, I mean, it ain't no secret. We kind of, people in these buildings know each other, so obviously got some information that way too. So, it's just is what it is, kind of like the quarterbacks. You got to prepare for a different quarterback, prepare for a different play caller. So we got a game film of that. I'm not sure whatever transpired after Texas, but we're going to have our hands full no matter what.
If Milroe's the starter, what challenge does he present with his feet?
Well, I think you're good at asking those questions you know the answer to. He's hard to catch, hard to tackle, hard to bring down, can run physical too. So he's a big challenge, as you saw early in the season.
A little bit off topic, but I'm sure you're aware of what your walk-on quarterback, Braden Waterman's going through with cancer treatments and whatnot and all that. What can you say about the support that he's received up to this point? Has it been any surprise to see the players respond to the way they have to that?
Yeah, there's things like that give you perspective, and all this, you win this game, or all the things that matchups and all the attention on that, which we all get, why football and SEC football is so followed and important. And those things, when they happen, and for, a kid to go through a third time of this at his age, just as unspeakable, and he's such an awesome kid. I mean, his energy, his positivity, he shows back up here after doing chemo, and I mean, he's just so cool. And I just love being around him, and talk to our players about when they're down, about they don't have enough plays, and they didn't carry the ball enough or catch the ball enough. Look what he's going through and fighting through, and still here positive. So he's awesome. I really do love him.
I didn't know if you had a favorite. I know you had mentioned the Western Kentucky deal before, but I didn't know if you had a favorite Nick Saban story in the past.
I don't know. We got so much work to do on this game. I don't know. That one's well documented. I just really respect him so much, and I think as you continue to mature, grow, and get older, and as a head coach, you realize how much a head coach has to deal with, even though I'd been one before, and all the issues with players and coaches, and then, to be at the top as long as he was and see how consistent he was. And we'd have games, we'd blow people out. And that's him. I mean, Western Kentucky, we're blowing him out, and he's losing his mind on me like, we're losing to Auburn or something. So that's him. And that's why he's so good, because he's so consistent.
You guys are playing Alabama last year, you guys had a bit of a skid at the end of the season with getting a lead on some teams and losing the game towards the end, and with Alabama being one of those teams and having to play them this week. Have you brought it up with your team at all about, hey, let's make sure let's finish this game because this is one of those games that y'all weren't able to finish last season? Is that just something that's been brought up in the locker room at all?
No, we haven't gotten to that. We're just in day one, and we got a lot of work to do, and maybe later in the week. But I think it's well documented. We had the ball and chance to go in and win the game against them, and didn't finish in the red zone. So, but again, that has nothing to do with this year. And now we got to go to their place, which is always extremely hard for everybody. All right, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.